Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Betty Chen. The results of the 2024 Taiwan presidential election are poised to significantly impact relations among the U.S., China, and Taiwan. In his New Year's address and on the occasion of Mao Zedong's birthday, Xi Jinping emphatically stated that the motherland must unify and expressed a firm resolve to prevent any attempts by any means to separate Taiwan from China. Additionally, China's pursuit of authoritarian expansion has shifted its attention towards a new arena, vying with the U.S. and Russia over control of Arctic shipping routes. This raises important questions about the broader geopolitical landscape. Joining us today are Huang Kwei-bo, National Chengchi University Professor of Diplomacy, and Jiho Chang, Keelung City Councilor from DPP. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show. Firstly, let's delve into a key segment of Xi Jinping's New Year's address, where he emphasized that the motherland must be unified.
要继续支持香港、澳门发挥自身优势，在更好融入国家发展大局中，保持长期繁荣稳定。祖国统一是历史必然，两岸同胞要携手同心。 共享民族复兴的伟大荣光。
During another public appearance, Xi Jinping explicitly stated that he's determined to resolutely prevent anyone by any means from separating Taiwan from China. So, Professor Huang, considering the current status of the Taiwan-Strait relations, what's your perspective on Xi Jinping's comments made in the lead-up to Taiwan's presidential elections?
If we look at what he said in his statement, I think I can say it's old wine in an old bottle, because we have heard Xi and his top officials say that once again about this determination to reunite with Taiwan. But I think in that statement, I also see a soft call for drawing Taiwan's or Taiwan people's attention to the desire for national reunification. This soft call is coming with the need for the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation or Chinese people, underscored by Xi Jinping a few years ago. But with that, I doubt a lot of Taiwan people would think this is the right way to be reunited with the Chinese mainland. But we also have to pay attention to what Xi Jinping said. He would like to prevent anyone, from, getting Taiwan away from the Chinese mainland by any means. What he means by any means is, of course, like what the anti-secession law says. The law was enacted in 2005, that, there is a peaceful way for national unification, while there's a non-peaceful way for national unification as well. So I think in that tone, Xi Jinping tried to demonstrate his certainty for mainland China to defend any foreign intervention that would get involved in the Taiwan Strait. But he only mentioned that, like he hoped the people of the Taiwan Strait, blah, blah, blah. I think he also attempts to play down the impact of his statement on cross-strait relations, particularly right before the voting day in Taiwan. So I think this is a very purposeful statement made by Xi Jinping, but the impact on Taiwan or Taiwan's action would be very small.
Okay. Professor Huang just said that this is old wine in the old bottle. Jiho, what's your take on this? What do you make of his statement?
Well, I think it's almost like a routine for the Chinese leaders to make some statement over the cross-strait relations prior to the Taiwan election. And I would agree, yes, it's a softer take this time around. And I would say that usually, if Chinese leaders, especially like someone like Xi Jinping, who explicitly state on the use of force to annihilate Taiwan, and all that, usually backfires against their favor, against Beijing's favor. Therefore, he has to make a statement over this, but not too much. Therefore, he's still saying about the by any means necessary and all that, but not exclusively said by force. And I would say that yes, it's an old wine in an old bottle, and the very fact that he mentions Macau and Hong Kong is precisely the niche of these two places are precisely their ambiguous relationship with China. And the niche of these two cities have diminished so much over the last 3 years precisely because China overtly annihilated any autonomy of these cities. And that shows us that the further you get away from China, the better you are at your economic niche. So I think that's the lesson we can draw from there.
So both of you agree that this would be a softer touch mentioned by Xi Jinping when it comes to Taiwan. But Reuters noted that Xi Jinping didn't specifically mention the use of force in this speech. But he still keep this use of force against Taiwan as an option. So Jiho, with Xi Jinping reaffirming the commitment to one China principle and a 1992 consensus, how do you interpret the developments?
I would say any time prior to Taiwan's election, the Chinese leaders would face pressures from within, both the military and also from the party, to make some kind of a statement, to address the crucial issues regarding the Taiwan elections. So Xi Jinping, we can consider that as his attempt to appease the internal conflict within his party. Although, of course, we know that Xi Jinping, as the party leader, the eternal dissent voices is largely been put down. But even that, we can still see that there are different factions within the parties that forces him to make some kind of a statement. So therefore, I'm saying that it's a routine a statement, but they know very well that if they make the statement too explicit, it's going to backfire against Beijing's favor in any case.
And also, in light of China's assertiveness, we understand that they're using different kind of means, including saying no to Taiwan independence and also having increasing pressure on Taiwan's sovereignty. How can Taiwan defend itself against pressure from China?
I want to address further that. So back in the 90s, in the 1990s, the use of force was commonly used, right? In the Chinese leaders' rhetoric, and by the 2000s, it's more like the benefit and economic benefit of annihilating Taiwan. And since the late 2010s, I think it's more like the manipulating of truth, manipulating of information warfare and whatnot. Therefore, the need for the Chinese leaders to make blunt statements as the 90s is no longer there, because they have already infiltrated a lot of the grassroots information and platforms. And I think that's our challenge for today and for the days coming forward, that whatever side or positions you want to take, we have to first agree upon what's happening truthfully. And I think that has been largely manipulated by the Chinese attempt. And that's something we all have to face, and we all have to work together to prevent such information warfare from coming in further.
Professor Huang, what's your take on this?
And I do agree with Jiho that the truth does matter in contemporary Taiwan society in order to bring us better politics. But I would also like to add that this information warfare not only comes from the mainland, but also from Taiwan society or within Taiwan. In other words, not only the Chinese Communist authorities, but also some political organizations or figures in Taiwan also create some information warfare on its or on their opponents within Taiwan. So we have a lot of fake news or disinformation in Taiwan. That's very unfortunate, but that's also the political reality we are facing in Taiwan. As for Xi Jinping's determination to deter Taiwan independence, I think that's a must for Xi Jinping when facing a great deal of internal problems. He has to face Taiwan in a very firm stance so that he can deal with his internal challenges, if any. Also, I think Taiwan has to think twice, what Taiwan's move can do to the good or bad of Taiwan itself. That is, when Taiwan would like to see worse cross-strait relations like what it is right now, then Taiwan have to, consider the possibility of some negative impact resulting from worse cross-strait relations. That is, one of the big factors outside Taiwan, which Taiwan has to deal with, is the Chinese mainland's authorities. In addition, I think across the party lines, most of the parties in Taiwan would favor a strong national defense. A strong national defense, or some people say a strong deterrence, would bring greater safety for Taiwan if cross-strait relations remain stable. So this growth in need of self-defense or deterrence has to rely largely on the U.S. Lastly, but not least, I think Taiwan people, we have to grow some stronger psychological defense against any external challenges on Taiwan, including those from the Chinese mainland. Mm-hmm. But this psychological defense rests largely on the unity of Taiwan society. So back to my first point, also which Jiho made, we need more truth in Taiwan society so that our society will not be torn down or torn apart.
So Professor Huang talked about the psychological defense, and also Jiho talked about the importance of truth. And as the presidential election approaches, Chinese People's Liberation Army disseminates disinformation and conducts military actions to disrupt Taiwan, often breaching its air defense zone. So by having this kind of, say, malicious behavior from China to Taiwan, do you think that China is experiencing related pressure, so they're forced to do so, or this is just a routine tactic?
I think it has become a routine tactic conducted by the People's Liberation Army.
Meaning they have to do something, right?
Yes, especially, I would say, probably after 2017 or 2018. This kind of air intrusion or maritime intrusion of the medium line in the Taiwan Strait have become normal. So it's not aimed at this year's election only, but it's aimed at the attempt made by the Chinese authorities to contain the spread of Taiwan independence force or to deter some desire of Taiwan people for further independence of the Chinese mainland.
Mm-hmm. Jiho, what's your take on this?
The very fact that we have an air defense zone means we're independent. Therefore, just like Professor Huang said, I do believe it's routine, and it's not aimed specifically for this election. And I think whatever the outcome of the presidential and the parliamentary election, whatever happens with the Chinese military exercise will continue. And that's the point here. That's actually the heart of the debate we are facing. What do we do when the adversary advances and make it almost norm to conduct their exercises or just flying into our air zone, whatever that they like? What do we do with that? Do we bow down? Do we try to negotiate? Or do we set a boundary where you can cross and where you cannot cross? And I think we cannot concede to that. We have to be firm. And by firm, I mean unifying as a country, that we have to have a firm position on all parties within Taiwan, that this is our zone, this is our air zone, and whether you want Taiwan to be more de facto independent in the future or not, right now, this is our boundary, and this is this is where we draw the line, and we have to say no to China across all parties. I think that's kind of one of the key message we can send to Beijing through this election.
So talking about a situation across the Taiwan Strait, now we would like to shift our attention to the Arctic. The Arctic has garnered significant global attention due to the impacts of climate change. China and Russia are intensifying their cooperation in Arctic development and navigation. The Arctic route, which links the Barents Sea to the Bering Strait, offers a 30% faster journey compared to the traditional Suez Canal route, primarily due to reduced ice coverage resulting from global warming. Russia is targeting year-round Arctic route navigation by 2050, while the United States is expanding its claims of sovereignty in the Arctic region. So China established its Arctic research station as early as 2004, positioning itself as a near-Arctic nation. Furthermore, it has incorporated the Arctic Ocean into its concept of the Polar Silk Road and has even deployed the naval vessels into the Arctic Circle, demonstrating an active pursuit of influence in the region. So what are China's objectives in expanding its influence in the Arctic region? Professor Huang.
It's in the common international law that the Arctic doesn't belong to any specific state. That is why I think the Chinese mainland authorities would like to claim its lawful rights to exercise any possible safe and peaceful activities in the region of the Arctic. But I think, it's a little bit challenging or confusing. Confusing for people like us to hear that the Beijing authorities claim that China is a country near the Arctic. Yes, it's not very far if we look at the whole globe. Mm-hmm. But the exact distance from the most northern point of China to the Arctic is roughly 1,500 kilometers.
Still, there's a distance there.
It's a big distance, actually,
right.
for us, at least for us.
Yes.
So I actually have no clue why the Beijing authorities actually issued a white paper on the Arctic in 2018, claiming that its objective is not to control any piece of land in this region, but to have a liberty of navigation, to have the right to fish, have the right to pave cables underwaters, as well as to explore natural resources and to conduct scientific research in the Arctic. I hope this is the real object the mainland Chinese authorities are pursuing. However, I think countries like the US have remained so doubtful of the true intention of the Chinese authorities. So I think it will be a very tricky issue between Washington and Beijing over the Arctic, mm-hmm. particularly when Russia has been deploying its military command in this region, and when Russians are deploying more and more missiles, especially supersonic missiles, in this region, which might have been targeted at the United States. So I think that will make things even more complicated.
Professor Huang just talked about the purposes listed by China in a white paper. Jiho, do you agree that's the real intention?
The Arctic region has always been of geopolitical significance for the United States and Russia ever since the Cold War. To get a hold of or to have a say, to have a position, to be a player in the Arctic is quite, probably one of the prerequisite of being a global player. And China has been trying to do that ever since, I think, the early 2000s. And one of the reasons China could get into the Arctic Council in 2013 was due to some contract signed in the 1920s, where China and where France invited China over into having this agreement of a multilateral agreement with the Arctic countries. And back then, China was actually represented by the ROC, which the professor is probably very familiar with. So that's one of the funny things about Taiwan. Actually has some kind of ambiguous or peculiar role in all of this Chinese involvement in the Arctic. But I would say that the Arctic to China plays mostly as a geopolitical significance, but also as a supply and a logistics line, because China right now relies heavily on the south, on the South China Sea for its trade, for its all the endeavors. So to have an alternative, to have another route into Europe, into the other side of the globe, Arctic it will be a hot spot in the next decade or so. So China, of course, is trying very hard to get a hold of it, so that in the foreseeable future, if anything were to happen, I mean, such as a conflict between China and Russia or China and the United States, Arctic would play a key role in the geopolitical logistics for China's sake. So therefore, I think that's the whole motivation behind it.
So talking about the stakeholders in the Arctic region, including like what you have said, not just China, but mainly Russia and the United States. And just recently, the United States has been increasing its military presence and has been trying to forge alliance with the countries neighboring the Arctic Ocean. So given these circumstances, what are the U.S.'s objectives in this context, and how might that affect the U.S., how might the U.S.-Russia relations impact China at this moment?
In the Arctic region, the U.S. has double threats. One is, of course, from Russia, another from Chinese mainland. Mainly because, as I said just now, Russians have been deploying quite a few supersonic missiles in the region that might have targeted the U.S. And the Chinese mainland, I know quite a few U.S. military officers have been arguing that the Arctic and the ice level is thick enough for the PLA submarines to hide under the ice. When they were hiding under the ice, first the satellites, it's not very easy for satellites to detect these PLA submarines. Also, the submarines could cruise around and probably, submerge and attack a specific country if necessary. That is why the U.S. also sees the possibility of the deployment of PLA submarines in the region as a threat to U.S. national security. And the main goal of the U.S. to take a very close look at both Russia and mainland China is probably because these are the two most possible countries that can threaten the U.S. possession of some existing rights over the region. The U.S. cannot say the whole Arctic region is part of the U.S. However, the U.S. probably doesn't want to see any possible challengers like Russia and the Chinese mainland to come up and to influence the rights of the U.S. I also would like to mention that the PLA has its intention to exercise more in a global scale. That is, the Arctic region is probably one of the most potential area to be explored by the PLA. If that's happening, then the passage for a lot of vessels, for every country in the world will become some place that would, hide some potential threat to the U.S. while the U.S. doesn't know. That is why, my last point is that, some U.S. officers said that in the past, the Arctic region used to be a protection of the U.S. because it protected the U.S. from the Russians' attacks or from mainland China's attacks. But nowadays, it became the routine route for conventional vessels and weapons. That's how the U.S. military sees the issue.
So one quick final comment from Jiho. What's your take on this?
The Chinese needs the Russia to be the buffer between that the eventual confrontation with the U.S. So that's why I think China at this moment is still helping the Russian Russian war effort as for now.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much. If you like our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.